It is almost Thanksgiving. I'm Norah O'Donnell here in Washington, and we begin this hour with some breaking news. NBC News has just learned that President-elect Barack Obama is expected to announce his Treasury Secretary on Monday. And joining us here now with all the details is NBC's Andrea Mitchell and, of course, Chuck Todd, NBC's political director. And, Andrea, let's start with you. Who will be Obama's choice to be Treasury Secretary?
Well, barring any unforeseen development over the weekend, it will be Tim Geithner, the New York Fed president. And Tim Geithner is a career Treasury official. He had been there since 1988, worked under both Bob Rubin, Larry Summers, and also in 3 administrations under 5 Treasury secretaries. He is highly respected on Wall Street, and this is part of the signal that Barack Obama will, in fact, come out. We have not seen very much or heard from him in 2 weeks with his economic team. He's going to personally do this, take questions. The plan is that there is a need to reassure the markets. Tim Geithner will be a very popular choice, not chosen for Treasury, but still very much in their long-term thinking is Larry Summers, the highly, talented former Harvard University president, got into some difficulty over political correctness and some criticism at Harvard. But the thought is that Geithner, at 47 years old, does represent change, is someone not really part of the Clinton administration, since he had come through so many other administrations, and could be a real team player, a good team player for this young president.
I mentioned that at the top of the show. The Dow has fallen 2,000 points since Election Day, and we've heard the Dow say, where's the economic team? They've been moving on this slowly and carefully. They wanted to do the national security and economic team, but why now?
Well, that is one of the points, is that no prior administration has moved earlier than December. They have moved really rapidly. They had wanted to roll out the national security team, we believe, first, but now they've realized they've got to move this economic team out. And there are some other big players involved. You may see Dan Tarullo as head of the National Economic Council, the job that really Bob Rubin created back under Clinton 1, and Austin Goolsbee and Jason Furman and other key economic advisors would be part of this team.
I want to talk about some more about Geithner in just a minute, but also, Chuck, we have some news, too, about who may lead up the Commerce
and the Washington Post had this first, and we've been able to confirm it, in that Bill Richardson, who has been considered the runner-up, I guess, in the Secretary of State sweepstakes to Hillary Clinton, is looking like the Commerce Post is going to be where he ends up. So he will be now a member of this economic team. Of course, he's somebody that there hasn't been a high-profile Hispanic that had been floated other than Richardson. So this will help quell some of the nervous Nellies that were with some of Obama's Hispanic supporters. But I want to pick up on something that you brought up. I had been picking up over the last few days, and others, obviously, the last few weeks. There were a lot of Obama's Wall Street supporters. And we got to remember, he had a lot of Wall Street supporters. A lot of the investment bankers were in Obama's camp, not in the McCain camp or even the Hillary camp, who were putting a lot of pressure, lighting a fire and saying, you have got to move. And there was some pushback by some political types in the Obama world who were saying, hey, wait a minute, the minute we announce a Treasury Secretary, then we own the economy. All of a sudden, we own the stock market. And so there was some nervousness about that, because they said, hey, the $700 billion bailout, we were told that was going to, if you didn't pass it, it was going to make the markets go crazy. It's not as if that has calmed the markets. That said, it looks like they have been convinced they got to do this first.
Let me say one thing also about Tim Geithner. The concern also within the Obama team was who replaces him at the New York Fed. He has been considered a very successful player. Some criticism about the decisions to let Lehman fail, but overall he is highly regarded, very, very bright, and someone who has been a key part of the Federal Reserve System.
Not a politician.
Right.
It is important for I think, Obama to be able to say, look, I went around, and, let's remember, Clinton's first Treasury Secretary was a politician. Okay, it was Lloyd Benson. You had Reagan's first Treasury. It's not always. So he's going to be able to differentiate and say, look, my first guy is not a politician.
And one other thing, it's not John Corzine, as talented a politician as he is, but he's a former Goldman Sachs leader, co-chair, and you've had Bob Rubin, now Hank Paulson, and it was by his supporters, John Corzine, all from Goldman Sachs.
That's weird. Let's not bring Goldman drama that you had between Paulson and Corzine into the Treasury Department.
Also, I don't think they want anyone from Wall Street. He is not a Wall Streeter. He is a career economist.
Almost thought of as a think tanker, an academic, but who obviously was.
This is huge, and we're going to see a huge reaction probably on Wall Street come next week. Now, as this economic team starts to form, because a lot of people, there's nervousness out there. Let's talk a little bit about who Tim Geithner is, because most people say, I don't know him. We'd heard his name as someone other than Larry Summers who would be chosen. Of course, he did work under Larry Summers, Dartmouth grad, and some people have said he's almost like could be a brother to Obama, because they're both 47 years old, and he has a lot of overseas experience, having grown up there, speaks Chinese, Japanese, studied in Asian studies at Dartmouth.
Well, and in fact, he first came to Bob Rubin's attention when Rubin was Treasury Secretary, because he was the staff guy who came in and briefed Summers and Rubin on the Korean and Asian crisis. And he came in with all the data, and he was always giving this great briefings. And,
which is hard to do for Larry Summers, right?
You know, and they spotted him. Yeah. You know, they said, you know, who is this smart guy who's coming and handling this whole crisis for us? And believe me, these were intense crises that went round the clock because of the Asian time difference and all of that. And so that's where he first started, his star started rising.
But I think the real challenge for him is going to be, the Treasury Secretary is going to have to be a public face. And, you know, I think one of the criticisms that Hank Paulson has gotten is that he hasn't been a reassuring. You know, I remember the first couple of days he seemed very reassuring during this economic crisis. And then the more he was out there, the less reassuring he got. Obviously, the markets reacted the wrong way to some of the things he would say. And so that's going to probably be challenge number one for the Obama team, which is to make sure he is a good public face. It's not necessarily supposed to be in the job description that Tim Geithner had over time, where he didn't have to be a...
I wrote 3 things down about what the new Treasury Secretary is going to have to do. He's going to have a bulk of about half of this money left, the $700 billion. So he's got to come up with a plan, right, for the economy. He's got to come up with new regulations, and he's got to work on trade deals, specifically with China. This is going to be a huge part of getting this country out of recession, the most difficult economic transition since FDR.
And key decisions, you know, what to support, what not to support, when to intervene. What do you do about the auto industry? That's going to be the first thing. The absolute first challenge is going to be how much to bail out the big 3, and whether there should be some sort of managed pre-packaged bankruptcy and restructuring of the auto industry's debt. It could not be a bigger challenge, and the judgment is clearly that he is up to it.
And no political distraction. You know, with all due respect to Larry Summers, there would have been, even if for just a couple of days, that minor political distraction of his tenure at Harvard, having to do with women and those issues. There's none of that that's going to be with Geithner.
The critics will say, the critics of all of this will say that the first person that a Tim Geithner would call for brilliant advice about how to handle something like this would be Larry Summers. And why isn't Summers involved? Summers may well be involved down the road. And Paul Volcker is still there as an outside advisor, not in a particular appointed role.
And just while I have all of you here, and Trish Regan from CNBC is also joining us live from CNBC headquarters with more on what's likely to be the market reaction and the Wall Street reaction to Tim Geithner likely being named as the new Treasury Secretary on Monday. Trish?
Well, I can tell you, Nora, the market's really liking this news. We're up better than 200 points right now. You know, there was a lot of concern over the last several days because we seem to be in a little bit of a holding pattern in terms of not knowing who the new economic team was going to be. And given that the economy is in such a fragile state with really seemingly no light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, a lot of investors were saying, we want to know what's going to happen. We want to know that government's on top of things. We want to know who is going to be there to lead us out of this slump. So this is obviously some very good news in terms of providing more clarity for investors to know just exactly what's coming as we move down the pike. You know, and as Andrea was saying just earlier, Tim Geithner is someone who's very much respected on Wall Street. In fact, everyone that I've talked to that has worked with him has had extremely good things to say about him. And they also point out that, you know, he's been part of this crisis, Nora, from the very beginning. So he's going to hit the ground running. He understands what's going on with the banks, with the financial institutions that are under so much pressure. He understands what's going on in the credit markets right now.
As you know, Trish, he was really at the center, of course, of what's happened over the last several months. you know, the sale of Bear Stearns, what happened with Lehman Brothers, and of course AIG. Is that a double-edged sword for him, or does that give him or those on Wall Street more confidence about Geithner?
It really leads to, I think, some more confidence because, again, he's coming in with direct knowledge of everything that's going on. He's really, as I said, hitting the ground running. He doesn't have to get up to speed. He's been entrenched in all the intricacies of all of these issues, from Lehman to AIG to Bear Stearns, as you pointed out, from the very beginning. So he understands what's at stake, and the hope is that he'll be able to really help move this forward. You know, a lot of people were thinking perhaps he wouldn't get it because he's so valued at the New York Fed that they wondered just exactly who might come in and replace him. You know, I think the market's sort of speaking for itself here. We're watching the market really gain some steam, up now 259. You can see on the lower right-hand side of your screen right there on the Dow on this news, Nora.
All right, Trish Regan, you're great to join us. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.